Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. Today we're going to talk about ransomware and DDoS attacks and the trending. And we have three speakers here. I'm Naeem Babri. I'm part of ISSA and InfraGuard. And we have two other speakers. Oh yeah, let's do that. Thank you. So our agenda today is we're going to talk about ransomware attacks, human aspect in cybersecurity, DDoS attacks, and ransom and DDoS attack trends. So this is me. I think most of you guys know me. Cheryl Cooper.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Cheryl Cooper. I'm a naval veteran with 25 years of telecommunications and cybersecurity experience, and I'm glad to be here today to share my perspectives.
Thank you, Cheryl. And we also have Burton.
You didn't have to finish, you just said Burton. But so I'm I shouldn't say new to the cyberspace, but new to the event. I'm Burton Kelso, known as the technology expert. If you live here in the Kansas City area, you may have seen me on TV. I'm on all the local television stations, Fox affiliate, CBS affiliate, et cetera, talking about cybersecurity and other attacks. I also own an IT company by the name of Integral here in the metro area. So think IT like Geek Squad. That's the sort of things we do. So we help end users and small businesses take care of their cyber attacks. Today we're talking about ransomware and obviously DDoS attacks, as I say. I kind of feel old school saying DDoS, because I'm from that old era of DOS, and when I think DOS, I think antiquated. So excuse me if I say DDoS attacks, but we're talking about ransomware. One of the key ransomware attacks that has occurred, if I can get this clicker to work because I really suck at them, there we go, is the Colonial Pipeline breach. Do many of you remember that breach? Show of hands. Yes, Colonial Pipeline. I'm surprised everyone should have heard of this because this is the incident where people were putting gasoline in trash bags. And as we all know, gasoline is not going to work in the trash bag. But one of the major things that you should know about the Colonial Pipeline attack is that it wasn't necessarily hackers breaking into a system. It was definitely user created. And that's one of the things that we have to worry about as far as ransomware attacks are concerned. Doesn't matter if it's Colonial Pipeline or even a mom and pop business down the road. Ransomware is a major issue, and a lot of it is human related, or human have to click on the links in email, either text messages, or even responding to voice calls that come in and give out important company information in order to be compromised. So one of the other lessons that we can definitely take away from the Colonial Pipeline incident is that everyone is immune. You would imagine that a company like Colonial Pipeline would have the best practices in place in order to prevent cyber criminals from accessing their information, but it's simply not the case. And let's look at some of the ransomware attacks that have occurred over the past couple of years with other companies that you would think would have their affairs in order as far as making sure that they are protected. So number one, I've got to cheat and look at the first one, is Acer. Acer, the computer manufacturer company, correct? Yes. How many people use Acer? I hate Acer. I'm more of a Dell Dell Macintosh type of guy. So it's not like I want to say, yes, great job, Acer, but you would think that a company like them would definitely make sure that they had their affairs in order as far as ransomware attacks are concerned. The one that I think is incredible is MedLink, which happened in November of this year. Anyone heard of the MedLink attack that has occurred? Probably a lot of you have not, because MedLink, I think, is a company based out of Australia. So the interesting thing about this cyber attack is the fact that it was blamed on Russian hackers. And as you know, we're not on good terms with Russia, because I'm sure many of you, as far as your company infrastructure is concerned, none of you are using Kaspersky as your antivirus protection, are you? I hope not, because Uncle Putin is probably in bed with, I forget the guy, Gary, I think it's Gary Kaspersky. So it's just one of those incidents, especially with HIPAA, and with the medical industry that you would think that these companies would have their affairs in order. And we'll talk about this a little bit, but again, it's human interaction that is a lot and has to do with a lot of these cyber attacks. The next one is JBS US, which was June 21st of this year. They were getting hit with a ransomware attack that replaced the company's ability to package meat products. That's kind of a bummer, except for you vegans in here, correct? But I'm a meat eater, so I'm like devastated about that cyber attack. Next we've got on our list is Toyota. Oh my gosh, what is Toyota doing to being a victim of a ransomware attack? It's unheard of, right? Toyota is kind of leading as far as products are concerned, as far as their vehicles. What in the heck are they doing getting attacked by cyber criminals? And the nature of this attack was between February and March of this year. You know, suppliers were hacked, showing that no matter how secure you think you are, it's not gonna happen. And the final two is Sinclair Broadcast Group, and then public services, as far as schools, health services, it's everywhere. And the common denominator with cyber attacks is the human aspect of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a human problem. If you think about it, it's not machines that are going around causing issues as far as ransomware attacks. It's people that become susceptible to these cyber attacks. You've got employees that are anxious about their holiday packages coming through on Amazon. How many of your workforce is probably using their work email to log on to Netflix and to log on to tracking services as far as making sure that they get the information that they need? I know for a fact that customers that we deal with, they don't have a home address. Their work address is their main address, and it causes issues within your company. What are you doing about that? Other aspects that you have to think about cybersecurity and the human aspect is your IT workforce. Has anyone heard the term quiet quitting? Show of hands. Everyone has. Probably some quiet quitters out there out in the audience, but you're probably not going to admit that. But quiet quitting is a huge issue in the cybersecurity space, and again, it's human related. Because if your IT staff is starting to get burned out, maybe you're not the best manager, or your IT director is not the best person, could definitely be causing burnout in the IT industry and causing your employees or your IT workforce not to be as vigilant about your network as they should. And that means that you need to take a look at your IT infrastructure and make sure that your IT staff is satisfied with the role that they're playing. Also with your employees, you definitely need to take a look and see that they are compliant as far as cyber attacks are concerned. I believe if you listened to Mike's keynote address earlier, he mentioned that one of the good ideas to have with your workforce is to sit down with them about 5 minutes a week and let them know what the latest cyber attacks that they should be aware of. I know many companies will go through the process of sending out the emails to test if they're a victim or that they're gonna fall victim to a ransomware attack through email. And that's good and dandy, but for a lot of people, it feels like they're being shunned. It's almost like the bad dog scenario where you've got your dog or pooch or pet or whatever, and they accidentally messed on the floor. And so what's the first thing you're gonna do? You're gonna go bad dog. And that's not a reward system that people are gonna get on board with. Some of the things that you should consider is a reward system, or maybe the cybersecurity employee of the week or the month if they catch a cyber threat. It's gonna make your staff a little bit more vigilant about protecting themselves from different cyber threats out there. And overall, it's gonna protect your company structure as far as making sure that you stay secure as far as all the cyber attacks are concerned. That's not to say that there's not bots out on the internet that are trying to infiltrate and get into your network. But the element that is going to cause the most issues with cybersecurity in your business are humans. And you've got to take care of humans on the IT staff, and you also have to take care of your workforce as far as making sure that they don't invite the cyber criminals in. Are you ready, Doctor?
I am ready. Yes. Human aspect. So humans are important for working on all the computers and things, but what we want to get with humans is, what is ransomware? And let's see. I think most of us know what is ransomware by now. It's a malware, basically. I think we all know malware has been around for a long time. And what does it do lately? It renders files and systems unavailable to users. Malicious actors demand money for having your files encrypted, not available to you. Recent attacks, I think we'll talk more about the recent attacks, besides like the pipeline attack. And I think today I was reading something on regarding ransomware, and I think it's called, let me see, I made a note today. Yeah, WannaWiper attack that's been blamed from Russian. And what they're doing is attacking files and making them, encrypting them. Basically, you cannot unencrypt them. So, let me see. Is there anything else, Cheryl, you have for the attacks that have been happening?
I was gonna add one.
Go for it.
You said wiper as far
Yeah,
as. So one of the things I was gonna add as far as the wiper attack is that, yes, you did definitely, Russian-based, it started this year, and it was aimed more for financial institutions. But one of the things that you need to be aware of as far as the wiper virus is concerned is that cyber criminals aren't necessarily going in trying to extort money from you per se. This is more of a vindictive type of cyber warfare where they just go in and they wipe all of the items off of your devices. Now this could turn into a ransomware attack where you've got criminals that will steal your data first and then wipe your devices so that they come at you as far as a ransomware incident is concerned. But this is one of the natures of ransomware that businesses need to look at, because as cybercrime evolves, you are going to see attacks that are definitely more destructive in nature, as opposed to the ones that, just pay us in Bitcoin and then we'll let you get back to work.
Thank you. And so what is malware? Basically, it's a type of, ransomware is a type of malware that prevents users from accessing their files and data by logging or encrypting data files. And if you look at the bottom on the screen, it talks about the steps for that, which is in fact, execute malicious code, encrypt the files, send a notification to the user, delete the operation, ask for ransom payment, and if the ransom payment is paid, then decrypt the files. There's on the screen, we also have some things about how to protect yourself. And basically, some of the basic things are perform backups. Security awareness training is very important, and that relates back to the human aspect of the cybersecurity. And the next is, if you're getting phishing attacks, have a good system in place for that. Install host-based intrusion detection system, vulnerability scanning, patch management. And the next thing is, have a map control to the intrusion, kill chain, and detection gaps, the 6 Ds. Cheryl, do you have anything on 6 Ds?
Sure. Is everyone familiar with Lockheed's intrusion kill chain? Yeah? Yes? No? Okay. I see some that are not familiar with the intrusion kill chain. I think we have it in the last slide that shows along the path of the kill chain, when Naeem talked about the 6 Ds, we start out in the kill chain with reconnaissance. We're gonna go in, we're trying to find everything out that we want about that network. We can stop that attack if we have controls at that reconnaissance phase. Then after we move from reconnaissance, we move into the exploitation phase. What kind of controls do I have in place to deny, detect, or destroy at the exploitation stage? Once I go into weaponizing, what kind of controls are in place at the weaponizing phase? This helps us, if we go through the intrusion kill chain, is to identify where am I missing my controls? Where could I have stopped this attack? And where we want to stop that attack is during reconnaissance, not at the point in which lateral movement starts to take place, because at that point, you're too late. So this is one of the ways that we as organizations can identify in doing the control mapping on our applications. Do we have security controls at every phase of an attack?
Thank you, Cheryl.
Can I add
Sure.
something else in? One of the things that I failed to mention on the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack is not only did cyber criminals go in and install ransomware on Colonial's devices, they also stole data. So in a lot of instances, enterprise companies will think that I'm safe from a cyber attack because we've got our information backed up. We don't have to worry about the criminals. But unfortunately, in this new day and age of cybercrime, criminals understand that data is key. And so it's important that you understand that you have to get into the mindset as far as your organization and as your workforce, as far as your workforce is concerned, to make sure that you don't become a victim of these attacks at all. I think a lot of companies think that, well, if we suffer a ransomware attack, we're okay, and we could just deal with it by restoring for backup. But number one, are you checking to make sure that your backups are current and up to date? Number two, in a ransomware attack, you definitely need to make sure that no data was breached, because criminals can come back around even though you restored your data and ransom you off as far as your data is concerned. So in this day and age, as far as ransomware, you don't want to become a victim at all.
Burton, you brought up a good point with data is key. Data is the crown jewel. And so we need to know where in our organization, where's the data? And what is the classification of the data? And once the data leaves us, where does it go? When it's going to those upstream and downstream applications. And where does it go? How is it being protected as it goes up and downstream is key.
No, good points. I think ransomware is basically a tool to steal data, yes. I'm going to talk about the checklist for prevention, checklist for ransomware next. It relates to what you guys are talking about. So for ransomware checklist, security awareness is the key. Like, we need to educate our users. Phishing, I believe, is one of the top way malware or ransomware gets into our systems. Okay? So security awareness is the key. And there's different ways to provide end user training, help them understand how to identify phishing, and phishing could be done so many different ways. The other prevention methods are, for an example, make sure, like what you're saying, firewalls. Like if there's a lateral movement happening, how do we identify that? We should have a strong email filtration system somewhere, or for phishing or block spams. Patch management is also very key, because bad actors know once they get into your system how to move forward. So patch management is a key. Make sure your antivirus software is up to date. And also, we want to make sure we block unauthorized application in our environment. No matter if it's a big business or small company, we want to make sure there's no unauthorized application running in that business. Other things we can do is conduct periodic security assessments, follow the rule of least privilege, meaning if you do not have a reason to connect to a server or data, you are not allowed to. And other things could be like disable your remote desktop protocol if it's not needed. Simple things like desktop office application, disable their macros, things of that sort. And I think you guys heard that at lunch keynote speak, have a backup using 3-2-1 backup rule, which is having 3 different copies of data. It's all come back to what Cheryl was talking about, data. And that 3-2-1 backup just means we have 3 copies of data. We need to have 2 offsite and 1 not connected or offline backup. Let's see. So they all relate to, these are all the things we mentioned relate to protecting your data. So these are some ransomware stuff. And ransomware is not new at all. I mean, it sounds like it's new. The first documented ransomware attack happened in 1989. That is a long time ago. And WannaCry is the biggest ransomware attack in the history. And we were talking about emails earlier. 1 in 3,000 emails that pass through filters contain malware. Average cost of remediation ransomware attack costs somewhere around $700,000. And average cost our organization pays for ransomware is about $233,000. And next idea is 99% of the organizations that paid the ransom owners the ransom cost, most of the time they will get the decryption key, but there's a 1% chance they won't. And other things are, let's see, we think in 2025, our organization will invest more than $1 trillion in their cybersecurity. This graphic is just to show how much email is the key or phishing is the way to get to your environment. So next thing we're going to talk about is, we talked about ransomware now, we're going to talk about what is DDoS attacks. And DDoS attacks been here for a long time too. So what are DDoS attacks? DDoS attacks are basically lots of machines are attacking a single device, floods the network with malicious traffic, and the legitimate traffic is not able to pass through. And it basically frequently results in loss of cost, and your service is not available to customers. An attack can last for hours or could be days. There are three types of DDoS attacks: volume-based, protocol attacks, and application layer attacks. Bottom of that screen, it talks about different types of attacks like UDP, SYN, and PIN, different types of attacks that can do the same thing. This graph is just to show from Cloudflare types of attacks that come in on the, I think it's the right corner from my perspective. It shows you the network layer attack. Next, I'm going to just give you a highlight on DDoS attacks and the costs associated with that. So if you're looking at this DDoS data, basically we're talking about it in 2022, DDoS attacks grew by 109%. The cost of DDoS attack averaged between $20,000 to $40,000 per hour. It depends on your business. The total number of attacks of this type globally reached 17 million in 2021. And I think the average size of DDoS attack was 150 megabytes in Q1 of 2021. I know you can read quite a few. The next highlight I want to provide is the biggest DDoS attack in the history occurred in September of 2021, and the longest was for 32 days, and that happened in Q2 of 2021. So now we know the DDoS attacks, what kind of damage they can do. It's basically making your service not available to customers. And right before that, we spoke and talked about ransomware, basically making sure your application or your data is not available to you. Next, I'm going to have Cheryl Cooper talk about DDoS with ransomware, our growing business.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Cheryl Cooper. And about last night. Yeah, about last night. Imagine for a moment, a 10-year-old little boy told me that he was an addict. An 8-year-old little girl said, I don't know what I'm going to do without it. And a 7-year-old little boy said, well, I don't know what else to do. I just have to have it. They admitted that their digital devices and staying connected to the internet was more important than the air that they breathe. So if that's the case, shouldn't it be as important for us as executives and practitioners to ensure that the internet and resources and assets are available to our customers, our consumers, and to our children? It is our responsibility as cybersecurity experts. Over the last year, there has been an unprecedented number of activities by law enforcement, the government, and private industry to counter ransomware attacks. However, we continue to see bad actors pepper the enterprise with ransomware attacks. These have been primarily motivated financially and by cyber criminals. As we've heard throughout the day, remote desktop, RDP, and phishing is the #1 egress point into corporate networks. But you know what? What we are doing today is not working, at least not yet. We're going to talk about, and Nigel talked about DOS. And you probably thought, well, what does DDoS have to do with ransomware? I thought that this was about ransomware, and it is. And it's something that we're seeing trending in the industry today, a ransom note plus a DOS attack equals payday. I don't need the technical sophistication that I do to launch an RDOS like I do with a ransomware attack. So what's the difference? What's the difference in these two? RDOS, ransomware. The difference is with RDOS, I don't encrypt. I don't need that skill set. I don't have to penetrate your network. It's an extortion attack. An attack mechanism for criminals to extort funds from businesses by threatening to perform a DDoS attack if the business does not pay. Have you guys heard of the RDOS? RDOS, I see one person shaking their head. Yes, RDOS is trending in the network. And who's behind these threats? Well, we know Russia is behind them, such as Fancy Bear, Russia, Cozy Bear, Russia, Lazarus, North Korea, Ramadan Collective. But there's also one other one I want to tell you about. Lapsus, L-A-P-S-U-S, $. They are a group of attackers that are teenagers, and they are very disruptive. I think I went through this. We send the ransom note to the business, and we threaten them that if you don't pay us so much in Bitcoin, we are going to launch a DOS attack. Here, this slide is just showing you year over year, based on the Cloudflare survey that was done, the number of companies that responded back quarter over quarter to say that their companies had received a ransomware note. Here's a ransomware email example. So one of your employees, they get this email that says, we are Amanda Collective. All your servers will be DDoS starting next Monday. If you don't pay 5 Bitcoins, if you don't pay by Monday, an attack will start, price to stop will increase 10 Bitcoin and will continue to go up. I have here, if you receive this email, what would you do? What do? You're sitting at your desk. Someone sent this email and said, if your company does not pay me, I'm going to launch a DOS attack. Usually when we see a phishing email, either within our companies, there's some way for us to report a suspected phishing email. But here, I don't want to delete it, right? That's sometimes what we do, right? We just delete it. But I know if I delete this, someone could come back and launch a DDoS? Any ideas? Anyone want to take a stab? You want to attack this the same way you would do with a ransomware attack. We want to get our security people involved. We want to get our legal teams involved. And we want to notify law enforcement so law enforcement can notify the FBI. But we do not pay up. But you've got to tell someone in your organization. And if you don't know, escalate up and ask somebody. So these are just further examples of the types of emails that you could receive. We are the Fancy Bear, and we have chosen XYZ company as target for our next DDoS attack. Please perform Google search for Fancy Bear to have it look at some of our previous work. Some trends. But here's what I really want to get into. I have an exercise here that I want us collectively as practitioners is to come up with what are some basic and advanced security controls to counter ransomware attacks. But I'm going to help you out here. I think first we need to identify what are some of the 5 common culprits of ransomware attacks. What's the first one? Unpatched vulnerabilities, right? What's another one? Unpatched vulnerabilities? What's another one there, Mr. Booth?
Stolen credentials. Stolen credentials.
Stolen weak credentials. What's another top culprit for ransomware cyber attacks? Yeah, we're going to talk about that. We've heard about that today. It's resonated throughout the last few hours. This lack of multi-factor authentication. But those 5 culprits are unpatched systems, lack of hardening, weak stolen credentials, data loss, lack of that data leakage protection, social engineering, and insider threat. So if we know that we have unpatched systems, lack of hardening, social engineering, and weak passwords, then what are some of the countermeasures for that, for us as companies, that we need to go back and make sure that we have these strategies in place in our company? Who wants to start? Well, one person said it. MFA everywhere. Multi-factor authentication everywhere. And why? Because if the credential is stolen and the bad guys try to authenticate into the network, they can't get in with that other piece of information, that PIN, that token, that biometric. Okay, so MFA is one. But what's something else?
Regular patching.
Yeah, patching. But here's one of the problems that we find with patching. People aren't patching regularly. What about Equifax? Remember the Apache?
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, the that Apache vulnerability. It wasn't Log4j, but it was an Apache vulnerability that Equifax knew existed, and the bad guys compromised that, and they knew it, but they didn't patch the system. So what we have to ensure that we're doing as practitioners and executives is to ensure that we have a patch policy in place where we're patching those high and critical vulnerabilities. We're not giving the bad guys that months and months of window exposure to compromise our systems. Love that. Okay, so patching. We've got patching, we've got MFA. We're gonna put in that program where we're patching on a regular basis, but how do we know we need to patch unless we're scanning? Right? A lot of us as companies, well, one thing, we don't even know what we have in our network. And if you've been around for a long time, like I used to work for Sprint, guys, some of these old companies, you know, we threw things in the network and no one put them in the database of record. And we didn't even know what we had in the network. So the first thing that we have to do is to have a solid asset management program, right? Let's go out here and identify what are our high value assets. And what would you think would be classified as a high valued asset? Definitely something that's gonna put you out of business. These are assets that, this is where we're gonna go back to the basics, to the books, that the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of that asset has been compromised on that system for a long term that would result in regulatory fines, and if that was unavailable, could put us out of business. That's a high valued asset. So we want to do asset management. Remember, we can't solve world hunger, but we want to go after the high valued assets first. Make sure that they're in a database of record. Once you have that in a database of record, you want to start doing that scanning. Once you're doing your scanning, you'll know where your vulnerabilities are, what are the severities of those vulnerabilities, and then implement your patch management process. And it can't be 3 months to 6 months down the road and leave that kind of exposure in your network. What else? What else can we do as practitioners to prevent DDoS, ransomware types of attacks?
Train personnel.
Yes, right, that human element. Yeah, we have to train our personnel. But you know what? We've got to start thinking outside the box on training our personnel, because they've seen that video so long, they're just it's up and they're clicking the mouse and doing something else. They haven't really learned anything. So we've got to, that quote, come up with creative ways so that our employees begin to have a secure mindset, in which they should, right, anyway, because the technology is in their home. But absolutely, employees, one of our first lines of defense. So we want that security awareness training.
Dr. Cooper, I was gonna ask something about high value assets that you talk about. Could you, would you agree, and I'm asking the audience members too, that your workforce could be considered a high value asset, because you talked about keeping track of who has what and where, but what about who do you have within your company infrastructure that you may need to be aware about as far as a high value asset? I don't know how you feel about that, or, you know.
I think human capital is a critical asset. Are they a high valued asset? Are they just a critical asset? I'm going to,
I was gonna say, if
It's-
everybody walks out,
Yeah,
you're
it's,
not gonna make money.
it's something to address because it's security culture. And so going back to some other speakers have said this, is like, if you're not taking care of the people and meeting them where they are to kind of, you know, build that culture together versus just shoving it down their throat, do this. It's the understanding the why on both sides is how you build that high value and that security culture, and that's your asset. That's how that becomes part of that.
any more thoughts on that? Human capital, employees, are they a critical asset or?
Don't publicize any information about your infrastructure. How many times have you seen a company and some of their IT personnel have a glowing article about how they conquered a problem? Here's their roadmap. first place. They just gave me the roadmap.
Absolutely, Bob, and you know what, I'm seeing other people saying yes. Well, I'd like to share with you guys some that we came up with. That I talked about, the asset and inventory management. How can you begin to start protecting what's in your networks, in your enterprises, if you don't know what you have? So the first thing you have to do is go out using automation and identify what's in the network. Up front here, we talked about patch and configuration management, hardening systems, vulnerability management. Everything in our network, we want to scan. And those high valued assets, we want to scan 100% daily. Data protection. What we want to do there is ensure that any restricted, sensitive data or anything that has a regulatory requirement around it, that we're using strong encryption. We also want to ensure data leakage. I don't know if any of your companies are going toward USB blocking. No longer allowing storage devices where an employee can plug in a jump drive and copy files to. Are you guys, anyone doing that? Yeah, I said, yeah. So data leakage, but also this jump drive could have some type of malware on it. So we're gonna block it.
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah.
As far as jump drives, one of the things, and I don't know if anyone's seen this in their company, but I know with ours, we've seen customers that have had employees ruining devices by plugging in USB devices into it. So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily deal with the whole ransomware, DDoS attack thing, but if you just want to protect your equipment, you should ban all US devices from your infrastructure, because you can fry a device by just plugging in a USB drive.
Or have that part of the network segmented. Because
Absolutely, Donna. Another good point that Donna just made here. I have it up here. Network segmentation. When we talk about lateral movement, what's the countermeasure to lateral movement? Network segmentation, to ensure that's the containment piece in that Trojan kill chain. 99.9% of attacks could have been prevented with MFA. MFA everywhere, guys. If you're not doing it in your companies, you need to. If you need cyber insurance, most cyber insurance companies won't even give you insurance if you don't have MFA. Use the cloud as redundancy, a defense in-depth strategy, intrusion detection and prevention, the security awareness training, and we're gonna install those firewalls at the perimeter. And of course, use the intrusion control chain by Lockheed and do your mapping to identify what kind of detect, deny, disrupt, degrade, deceive, and destroy controls that you have along the kill chain. This is an excellent tool to use if you've ever had a breach, for you to go through the kill chain and identify where you didn't have a control. This will help you to identify where your gaps are. We're at about time. I'd like to open it up for Q&A.
Any questions, guys? Basically, what we just summarized is the ransomware, DDoS attacks, and ransom DDoS attacks. They're all interrelated. They all have the same kind of prevention, and they're all about the cybersecurity hygiene, what Cheryl Cooper talked about. To protect your environment, and I think that's what Cheryl Cooper covered in the last slide, all those 7 steps, that will help us with all those 3 things. And ransomware is going to keep on growing all the things we're reading, and especially the ransomware as a service and ransomware for DDoS attacks, because you don't even need to know how to do an attack. You can show a simple attack to some company and say, hey, I'm ready to do this attack, I need money. And you may never be able to attack it correctly. So all these hygiene will help us, and also to connect with your cybersecurity engineers and your senior management to let them know this email came in. and what should I do next? So those are very important things to do.
One of the things that I was gonna add as far as, I know I'm always talking about the human aspect of cybercrime, but it's definitely a human problem. Definitely make sure that you are aware of any insider threats that you could have within your corporation, because you never know, especially with a looming recession, you never know what information that your IT staff or even employees will share with the outside world. So I don't know if your corporation or corporations have a cybersecurity plan in place, but if you don't, now's the time that you definitely need to implement one, because there are people that are setting up Netflix accounts, setting up Disney Plus accounts with your company email. Those emails definitely can fall into the hands of cyber criminals, and it's one step that they can use in order to get inside of your corporation. So it's not that you have to be, a Putin, I guess I can use that term right, as far as your company infrastructure is concerned, but at the same time, you definitely need to vet your people and make sure that they aren't the gateway for criminals to get into your company.
Any questions, guys? Cheryl, do you have any final thoughts?
Just the final thought is that it's not just the cybersecurity executive or practitioner's job to protect our resources and assets. It is everyone in the company, and we're gonna have to do a better job at changing the paradigm and changing the culture within our companies where everyone is protecting our resources.
Thank you, guys.